So, discussion about our flight from Keene, New Hampshire to Bangor, Maine. So, our first part was, how are we going to receive our clearance? Well, in that case, we'd refer to the chart supplement for Keene, New Hampshire. For flight users, your AFD tab under the airport information. And we would see in the chart supplement that we are told that we have a clearance delivery frequency at Keene of 121.6. The other way, if we were unable to get a hold of clearance delivery on 121.6, would be to call Boston Center on the listed phone number, 603-879-6859. Okay, so we've received our clearance. Then we are going to start navigating our flight. So we'll start on the navigation with the actual departure itself. So I asked, what are the takeoff minimums for your Part 91 flight? Now, some people will say, oh, Part 91, no takeoff minimums. So 00. Well, no takeoff minimums unless we have non-standard takeoff minimums, which Keene does have. So we can tell it has non-standard takeoff minimums and or departure procedures published by the T in the triangle on our approach plates. So we access the front section of our terminal procedures publication under takeoff minimums and departure procedures. And we see that runway 32 at Keene has takeoff minimums of 1,600 feet and 2 miles. So that would be the minimum necessary to use that runway for departure. Now, the initial part of our departure, we will also see in that same section that we have departure procedures published. For departing runway 32, we are going to climb on a right turn to a heading of 350 to an altitude of 2,100 feet, and then a climbing left turn direct to the VOR at our assigned altitude. So in our case, we will take off of the runway, make a right turn to 350, climb to 2,100 feet, and start a left turn back towards the VOR, which is going to be somewhere in the range of probably a 200 to the station. So our initial setup should be on the Keene VOR 109.4 with a 2 indication needle centered, like we said, probably be someplace in that 200 range as we finish the turn. So we'll climb to our assigned 5,000 feet. We're expecting to go higher after when we get with Boston Center. When would our next navigation change be? Reaching the Keene VOR and to start on our assigned Victor Airway. So when the flag disappears, we would begin a turn towards a heading of 065 to join the 065 radial to be on the airway that heads towards Concord. So we should see 065 from on our OBS, center the needle, fly our airway out. Now, when will we have to make a change? Well, if we look at the low-end route chart, we'll notice that that airway between Keene and Concord is 41 nautical miles. There is no bend in the airway. There is no changeover point noted. So we would change at the halfway point, 20.5 miles. In our airplane, as it's set up, how would we determine 20.5 miles? Well, I'll give you credit for one of two ways. We could time, we could use our E6B and figure out how long it's going to take to fly 20.5 miles in that direction with today's winds at our true airspeed, at our altitude. And we'll time, and then we could switch to the Concorde VOR. There's no intersection. An intersection there would make it easy. There's no published intersection, but we could make our own intersection. We can use a cross radial off the Manchester VOR, which Manchester VOR was on 114.4, and I approximated the 305 radial off of Manchester would approximately run across the halfway point in our airway. We could use that to change as our changeover point, our halfway point, and of course then we would change to Concorde's frequency, 112.9, okay? We would set 066, and we should have a 2 indication to continue to fly along that Victor Airway. Next change would come reaching the Concorde VOR. Flag disappears at the Concorde VOR. We are going to turn to join our new airway, 037, twist our OBS to 037, join the 037 radial to be on our airway, and fly our airway, center the needle and fly our airway. Our next change comes if we notice this airway has a bend in it, so we would use the bend in the airway. How would we determine that we've reached the bend in the airway? Well, there is an intersection there that is denoted by a cross radial from the Augusta VOR. The Augusta VOR would be on 114.95, and it is the 283 radial off Augusta. Tells us we've reached the bend in the airway. So at that point, we should switch to the Berlin VOR, which would be on a frequency of 110.4. We should also change our OBS to 358, and we would have a 2 indication. Our next switch would come reaching the VOR. Flag disappears. We would turn 099. We would set 099 on our OBS. We would join that to fly our airway outbound. So we should see a from indication set to 099, centered, and then we would be on that Victor Airway. When is our next change? Well, we notice along this airway that we do have a changeover point denoted. 25 miles from Berlin is our changeover point. 75 miles from Bangor. So, why so close to Berlin? Give you a minute to think about it, and then I'll tell you the reason is look at what type of VOR Berlin is. It is a terminal VOR. What's the service area of a terminal VOR? Well, if we go into the AIM, we would see the chart would tell us that it is 25 nautical miles up to 12,000 feet MSL. So that is why the changeover point is so close to that VOR, because the type of VOR it is. So at the changeover point, I would switch to Bangor VOR 114.8, and that would be a 103 to that VOR. Also, we're going to tell the 25 miles the same way we did before between Keene and Concord. So we could time it, again, E6B figure for that route, or we could make our own intersection. We could use the Augusta VOR again and use approximately, say, a 325 cross radial. And that'll tell us when we're approximately 25 miles out from Berlin, and we should affect that changeover. So when would my next change be? It would be reaching the Bangor VOR. It's not located on the field. So to navigate direct to the Bangor airport from the VOR, I would look again in my chart supplement under the Bangor airport, and I would notice that under radio aids to navigation, it tells me that a 155 from will take me to the airport, and it gives me a distance. So, but before we even got there, we got a different clearance. We got cleared to the VOR, and we got cleared for the ILS 33 at Bangor with the procedure turn. Okay? So, first question is, can we do that procedure with our navigation performance? Notice there says that two things are necessary for this approach: DME or radar. We never said radar contact was lost, so we could do the full procedure even without DME, because the point that we need to know can be identified by radar. We can be told about Isu, or however you want to pronounce the point, that our hold is at, that our procedure turn hold is at. Okay? And then we could also be told it on the way back in. So the way that we would navigate that is we would reach the VOR. We were assigned at or above 4,000, so we would stay above 4,000 till we reach the VOR. Crossing the VOR, we would leave on a 154 from. We could descend to 3,000 feet, and we would fly for 18.3 miles until we reached the procedure turn hold, where radar would tell us we've reached it. We would enter the hold, turn ourselves around. Radar would tell us again that we've reached it. At that point, we would be on the localizer, in the hold, coming around, joining the localizer back towards the runway. Once we were told that we've crossed that point again inbound, we could descend to 2,300 feet. At 2,300 feet, we would intercept the glide slope, and then we would follow the glide slope down to one of our questions. What are our minimums? Well, when we look at the straight-in ILS 33 minimums, we notice a pound symbol, and then it tells us 363 feet, 24. Well, at 363 feet is our decision height. The 24, we would add 2 zeros to. We would need 2,400 feet of RVR. Well, what if the RVR is out of service? Well, then we convert that to statute miles of visibility. We would need a half statute mile of visibility. So, our other question was, based on the plate, at what height would we be above the threshold on the glide slope? And if we look at the profile view, we'll notice it tells us the angle. It also tells us TCH, threshold crossing height, and it says 57 feet. We'll also ask for bonus points. What exactly is 57 feet above the threshold? What part of the airplane? The answer to that is the glide slope antenna. So if your glide slope antenna is on the belly of the airplane, okay, basically the belly of the airplane's 57 feet above the threshold. Now if your glide slope antenna is up on the tail co-located with your VOR antenna, well then the antenna itself is 57 feet, but the wheels of your airplane may be a little closer to the runway than that. Okay, think about the height difference between the wheels of the airplane and where that antenna would be located on the vertical. Okay, so the actual landing gear of the airplane may only be 47 feet from the across to the top of the threshold. And where do we get that information? You don't believe me? It's in the AIM. So we would look at section 1-1-9. That's going to be, and then we are going to look at D6, which is going to describe the glide slope. Okay, and and that section is going to talk about that threshold crossing height. If you don't believe me and you're bored, need to sleep, open up the AIM and take a look. Now the last bonus question, we asked about Portland and MON. So MON on an airport stands for VOR, Minimum Operational Network. These are going to be airports that have VOR and or ILS to assist in the case of performance-based navigation, most likely GPS, failure. Airports that are guaranteed for what the FAA calls safe recovery, or you'll be able to get in and land even in the case of a GPS system-wide failure. And so where we saw that was, or what describes that again is in the AIM, in 1-1-3, section F, it describes some of the parameters of that program, what type of navigation you'd expect to get. It's, I believe it's 100 miles on the VOR at or above 5,000 feet is the guarantees there for navigation. So it's something that's out there, like we said, in the case of GPS system failure. So, was it fun? How'd you do? And look forward to maybe making some more and some different scenarios. Any scenario that you'd like to discuss, go ahead, drop a comment, and I'll see what I can do to get on it. Thanks so much.